Welcome to your favourite day of the week, everyone, and with the Tokyo 2020 Olympics just finishing up, I thought we'd travel back in time, roughly 2,800 years ago, to ancient Greece in order to discover the joys and find out what it was really like to attend the ancient Olympic Games. And you're probably wondering, why is Jamie in a suit? Well, smart presentation first and foremost, but secondly, I've got a wedding to go to in about 2 hours, and I thought, why not get the juices flowing with a video about the ancient Olympics? Anyway, today's 2020 Tokyo Olympics offers 33 sports with 50 disciplines and a total of 339 medal events, which has grown drastically from the 9 sports, 10 disciplines and 43 medal events featured at the first Olympic Games in modern history 125 years ago in 1896 in Athens. However, the first ancient Olympic Games, held in 776 BC in the Greek town of Olympia in the region of Eli, only had one event, which was called the stadion, named after the arena it took place in. It was a 200-yard or 180-metre sprint and began with the signal of a trumpet blow, with the track being big enough for around 20 competitors. If the officials decided the race was a tie, it would be rerun. Similarly to today's sprinting events, they ran in heats, and the winner of those heats progressed to the finals. However, not similarly to today's sprinting events, they also ran naked. The athletes for the first few hundred years of the games could only be free Greek males. Non-Greeks, women, slaves, murderers, those convicted of defiling temples, and all those who had not respected the sacred truce, which we'll touch on a bit later, were excluded from participating in the games. The athletes had to arrive at Olympia 1 month before the games began, and had to be training for at least 10 months prior. The winner of the first ever stadion race was a man called Coriolis of Eli, and every subsequent winner of the race had the Olympiad named after them, being the 4 years between each Olympics. Records of times and distances were not recorded. The idea was to be the best then, not to beat other silly records. Each winner received a crown of olive leaves and an olive branch cut from the sacred tree known as Kalistephanos. The olive was seen as significant, as it was believed that all trees in Olympia were planted by the legend Hercules himself. Victors were welcomed back from the game as heroes. They were drawn into their city on 4-horse chariots in a ceremony to celebrate their victory. Huge banquets were held to honour them, and they could also receive additional benefits such as exemptions from tax and invitations to join the political elite. However, the real prize for athlete came in the form of fame, glory and historical immortality. For example, Leonidas of Rhodes won all 3 events of the stadion, the Diolaus, which was 2 laps of the stadion, and the Hoplitodromos, which was the race in hoplite armour, in 4 consecutive Olympics, and gets his name mentioned in a Jamie's Day YouTube video 2,000 years later. What a result for him. The first woman to win the crown was Kiniska in 392 BCE. Although women were not allowed to compete in the Olympics, when the later ones came around and added equestrian events, it was the owner of the horse who received the laurel crown and not the rider. For the first 12 Olympics, the stadion foot race was the only event at the Olympics. And you're thinking, why would they wait 4 years just to see someone run one race? Well, the Olympics was as much as it was an athletic event as it was a religious event. Prior to the Olympics, areas around the Mediterranean had sporting events that were associated with honouring the dead, particularly those of heroes and those fallen in battle. The origins of how the Olympic Games began are quite hazy though. Nonetheless, they were rooted deep into the Greeks' belief and were used to honour the god of the sky, Zeus. On the third and middle day of the games, 100 oxen were sacrificed to Zeus, with some of the meat being used as a religious offering and the rest being distributed to the spectators there. The host town of Olympia was uninhabited throughout the year, but when the games were on, the site would have been absolutely buzzing, with around 50,000 people making their way to see the event, who would have stayed in makeshift campsites with no permanent accommodation available until future Olympics. If you were to attend the games, they would have been taking place in the hot Mediterranean summers, so heat stroke would have been a real possibility. However, drinking water was really scarce due to the River Clado's low water levels, so you'd have to make do with a bit of wine. The 50,000 spectators would attract all kinds of people who would want your money, such as pickpockets, fortune tellers and sex workers. However, the sights would be something to behold. Beauty contests, fire eaters, jugglers and treatment from masseurs would all catch the eye, as well as poets, philosophers, and lecturers, all enrapturing their listeners. Musicians, artists, and craftsmen would all come to share their work, and you could also admire the temples of Hera, Zeus, and the Pelopion. Heralds from Eli were sent all around to advertise the coming of the games, and people did not just come from the Greek mainlands, but also the Greek islands. As in ancient Greece, people carried swords. You could have been stabbed or mugged for travelling across the country to get to the games, or got caught in between the war. So, to facilitate the movement of spectators, a sacred truce called a Kechieria, on screen now, I probably mispronounced it, was held to respect the religious importance of the games. That was difficult. No wars were permitted, no arms could be carried in the territory of Eli, and no hindrance was to be given to anyone travelling to the games from wherever they came from and whichever territory they had to cross. The 50,000 spectators would have provided boisterous support for the athletes, showering the victors with laurel leaves and flowers. All men were allowed to spectate the games. However, only unmarried women were allowed to spectate and watch these men flop about freely. One famous breach of the men-only rule was a woman named Callipateria. I think I pronounced that right. She had trained her son, Paiseridos. I probably didn't pronounce that right. And disguised as a male trainer to get into the race. When her son won his race, she got a bit overexcited, jumped over the barriers to celebrate, but her clothes fell off and revealed she was a woman. Outrage in the stands, people were fainting. How could this happen? A married woman spectating the ancient Olympic Games? Disgusting behaviour. Disgusting. I can't believe it. I cannot believe it. She did escape the prescribed death sentence penalty, however, because she came from a family of great Olympic victors. After that event though, all trainers, as well as the athletes, had to be naked as well. More flopping about freely. More events were added to the Olympics to bring the total events to 18, spread over 5 days. Specially trained judges were present at the games in special purple cloaks. Rules were rarely broken, but if they were, the athletes faced exclusions, fines, and even flogging from the whip. If he did not pay the fine, the city he represented had to, or they would be excluded from the next games. The fines were used in part to build statues to Zeus. The games continued throughout the Hellenistic period, with more buildings being added for greater spectator comfort, with an increase in athlete specialisation and training as well. After the Roman conquest of Greece in 146 BC, the Olympic Games began to be neglected and started to decline, but still had the popularity to continue. One of the most infamous events of Olympic history occurred under the rule of Nero. He desired victory in all chariot races of the Pan-Hellenic Games in a single year. So he ordered the four main hosts to hold their games in 67, and therefore the scheduled Olympics of 65 were postponed. Of course, being the Emperor of Rome, he won every event he entered, and he also considered himself a talented musician, and added singing and music contests to those festivals that lacked them. And of course, he also won all of them, probably because the judges were too afraid to award the victor to anyone else. After Nero's assassination though, the Olympic judges had to repay all the bribes that were bestowed to them by Nero, and after that, the Olympics that Nero won were considered all void. In the first half of the 2nd century, the Greek emperors Hadrian and Antonius Pius oversaw a new and successful phase in the history of the games. However, it was Emperor Theodosius who finally decreed that all cult practices, including games, be stopped, and the final Olympics was held in 393 AD, after 293 Olympics over a millennium. So if you have made it this far in the video, thank you all for watching our history of the Olympics. If you haven't yet, please do like the video, and if you haven't yet, please do subscribe. I wore a suit for this, so you can scroll down and tap those 2 buttons. Anyway, here's to the lovely couple, Tom and Brody. This video is dedicated to you. I'm going to go to your wedding now, get absolutely drunk, and flop about freely, because it's my dream to be an Olympian. Anyway, I've been Jamie's Day, your favourite day of the week, and this is the history of the Greeks flopping about freely. I'll see you all next time. Peace.